Hi, it's Jerry Roberts. Welcome to a special edition of Newsmakers. It is Thursday, June 2nd, and I am very pleased to welcome back Dr. Hilda Maldonado, Superintendent of the Santa Barbara Unified School District. I know it's a busy time, Superintendent. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jerry.
Well, I checked back and you were last here on August 13th, and it was right before school was going to start. And now here we are in graduation season, so it's a good bookend, a couple of interviews. But you know, at the time, all we talked about was COVID. It was COVID, COVID, COVID. You know, and you said I'm going to keep the schools open, and I admit I was a little skeptical. But congratulations, you did it. You were right. I was wrong. But you know, a lot's happened since then, and you know, COVID is no longer top of mind. And one of the things that's happened is you seem to have gotten a new name, which is the embattled Hilda Maldonado. Everywhere I look, it says embattled. Do you feel embattled?
You know, sorry, Jerry, I can hear a little bit of noise background, and I think there's some background noise on your end. Do I feel, well, it's kind of interesting. My name, Hilda, as you know, has German roots, and its meaning is warrior. My middle name is Leticia, which is Spanish, which means friendly. So maybe I'm an embattled friendly warrior. I don't know. I'm making a connection. Do I feel embattled? I don't know that I would describe myself or my feelings as feeling embattled, but I definitely feel that there are some misunderstandings by some people about the things that we are doing in leadership and some of the changes that we brought forward that maybe haven't always translated as positive. And as a person that came in during a year where I couldn't really get to know people, the first year, beginning a second year with this charge to stay open, I think gave us this sense of like, things gonna be back to normal and we're gonna all behave normally. And it hasn't been that case. We got hit with Delta and then Omicron, and it was still not a normal year. I just had a conversation with a parent. I'm here at La Colina for the 8th grade promotion ceremony, and she reminded me that sometimes we haven't taken the time to do the post-disaster healing or post-traumatic event, you know, processing that we need to. And I think maybe we could have set some expectations of people, including ourselves, that distance learning is over, we're opening a new year, we're going to stay open, and we're going to act as if things have not happened to us collectively.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I see what you're saying. But, you know, let me start with a little bit of news. This letter that went out, I guess, last night or this morning to all of the teachers and employees at the district over the signature of the members of the school board. It says, we acknowledge there has been a breakdown in communications and trust in some of our schools. And this is, of course, in response to what we've been hearing and seeing from the teachers. First, that perception survey back in November, and then more recently, the letters from some of the schools, the teacher schools, and demonstrations outside. Anyway, the board, you know, says they're going to address, you know, a number of the issues that were raised: exit interviews, no new initiatives, and challenges of student behavior. But let me ask you about this, because some of this stuff has been pretty harsh. I mean, I get the policy stuff, and but some of it has been very personal, and I think even threatening in some cases. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely made me feel sad. It's been very hurtful to be part of an organization where we have adults having personal attacks or adults behaving in a way that I don't think would be what we want to model for students, which is who we serve. I've gotten calls from family members and friends who have read about some of these things that are said about me, who know me and are concerned. Why are you being treated this way? I had parents come to me in November. In fact, some of our parents from our Latino community who read some of the things that were said about me came to me and directly said to me, Superintendent, if people say these things about you, then how do we know our children are safe with teachers? And how do we know people are going to treat our kids fair if they treat the superintendent this way? And that was concerning to me because I would like to run an organization that has ways of communicating that are more effective and that give me some constructive feedback on things that I can improve on. I am by no means a perfect human being, but I wouldn't want to create a culture or a school system that I hear people saying, oh, we don't want to say who we are because we'll be retaliated against. There is no way that we can retaliate if somebody brings forward a complaint. We have procedures for that. And that retaliation is not in my heart. That is just not what I do or who I am.
All right. Let me ask you about some of the specifics that have been discussed. One is the departure of a lot of executives in the cabinet. And, people saying, you've driven them out, not the people who've left, but others saying that, or, it's a hostile work environment. Can you say a word about the departures, the number of departures and why that's been happening?
Sure. So there is a narrative that's being promoted that I've driven people out. And when I've spoken to the different people that have made decisions, there are many reasons why people choose to leave. Some are retiring, and that's appropriate. It's time for them to take on a new chapter in their lives. Some have personal reasons for going back to other jobs or places where they have a greater support network. Some are looking for different opportunities professionally. They understand that having a variety of professional experiences gives you different perspectives on how schools are run or how to do your job differently. That's been said to me personally. If there is a different narrative that has been said beyond what I have experienced, then that's why I think the board is making the right decision to say, hey, let's do some exit interviews and let's give somebody that's not in the school district an opportunity. And I could understand that. I could understand why some people might not be feeling like they could be completely forthright.
Right. Right. So, yeah, and that's one of the things that the board pledged in this letter, that they're going to have exit interviews, I guess, from an outside consultant or something like that. The other thing that occurs to me is, when you come into a top executive position, you also want to have your own people. You don't necessarily, want to continue with the group that's there. Everybody has their own style and their own values. Has that been a piece of it?
I have made it part of my career to not have that perspective where I feel that I need to come in and have my own team. I don't want to live in an echo chamber. I don't want to have yes people around me. I actually welcome divergent points of view. I definitely, coming into a new place, know that I would need to know who are the different influencers. We have all types of leaders in the school district. They're not all by title. There's informal leaders, there's influential leaders. And I think that coming in, I understood that coming in. I brought in one person who applied for the elementary assistant superintendent. That was Ana Escobedo. And she was somebody that I have known, have had throughout our career, different, LA is a big place. We have 1,300 schools. And so I had different experiences working with her throughout my career, but not always together. I know that people have written that I brought in Steve Vance. I actually did not bring in Steve Vance. Steve Vance applied without me knowing that he had applied. We were principals together at one point in our career for working for the same director, but he was in the South Central area at Quincy Jones Elementary. I was in Hillside Elementary, more than the Northeast Los Angeles area. And I could see that, but it's not my wish to have people around me that I only know. That would be a blind side for me to do that. However, having said that, would I like to have people who are aligned on the same values, purpose, and goals for what we want a school system to be? Absolutely.
And you have hired two new, I guess, assistant superintendents, Dr. Monroe, and there's been some controversy about him, of course. And I'm blanking on the woman's
Miss
name.
Edison, Kenya
Yeah.
Edison.
Yeah, and when will they start? On July 1?
Yes, they will start July 1. They're going to be here in a couple of weeks just to do a little bit of a meet and greet with some folks in town. And, they're still looking for a place to live as well.
All right, well, tell them they have to come on Newsmakers first thing, okay? I mean,
You
the
got
other
it.
thing that struck me in reading all of the comments in this survey, certainly there's morale issues. A number, I'm just a couple of quotes, we're burned out, plain and simple. We are hitting the wall hard, complaining about the, staff shortages and so on. And I think it's important to remember what teachers did go through, having to suddenly transition to online teaching, and then they're back. Were you surprised by the level of morale problems that was expressed in that survey?
No, I am not surprised. And like I said in the beginning, the ways that we have been shaken up as a school system and the number of times our teachers have been asked to pivot over and over again from the very beginning has been just unbelievable. From, within 2 weeks, taking all of the curriculum and experiences that you have and suddenly being put in a situation where you have to learn the technology to be able to access all these kids from home, to coming back and doing a hybrid model where you're teaching 2 days and 2 days off and a new group comes in, or where you're having to take small groups of students, where we were looking at, how do we adapt curriculum? We stopped using paper altogether. I mean, it's just been incredible what's been asked of teachers. And I think that we did not take enough time to stop and just acknowledge that. In retrospect, we could have used time differently. And I had some teachers reach out to me and ask for more time to do different things. And I think, one of my lessons learned is I need to also stop. As the leader, my job is to be forward thinking and vision making and pushing us forward. And I think the board's direction to say no new initiatives is the right tone. It's the right time for us to stop and just assess, take time to breathe, take time to talk about what our district's really about and realign our values. We had a summer institute last year to kick off the year, and I had teachers create a survey of what will we be known for by the end of the year. And we had so many great vision statements about, combating equity issues, closing the achievement gap. We had a bunch of great speakers last summer, and I never thought that it would actually turn, from that to having, all this inspiration around what we want to do for children and achievement, to just being completely exhausted and having low morale and tired. And, that is information for me to take and learn from and do better by.
Yeah. Too many initiatives, not the year for new programs, let us catch our breath. That was really an issue that really came out. And then I have to say, I would say maybe, I don't know, 20%, 25% of the concerns that were expressed were about vaccines and the vaccine mandate. How did that ultimately play out? Did we lose a lot of teachers over that? Did people stay out? Where does it stand now?
So we did lose some people over that, and then as things became less clear, as you remember, we had a vaccine that mandate that was implemented in the fall, and then as we started to look at boosters and we started to move away towards the spring on some of the ways that we will stay safe and the rates went down, we started to bring some people back. But I do think it did something psychologically to staff to have a vaccine mandate when they started to see their friends who refused to take the vaccine being asked to leave or to take a leave, because that was an option, is to take a leave of absence until they were able to come back when things changed in terms of the rates of infection and we were having a different approach. So I think, that is something that had, everything has been polarized. We've had so much polarization around what we believe. We have teachers on the one hand saying, no, it's not safe, we can't return, we want everybody vaccinated, we want the kids vaccinated. And then we had teachers that were saying, we don't believe in the vaccine, we don't believe this is important, you can't make us have a vaccine or even mask. So I think all those polarities did cause that division. But at the end of the day, I was a former teacher, Jerry, and I will say that teachers stick together, and they should, because they are the ones that are the key members of the heart of the organization when it comes to who works with our kids. And I think that when teachers see us treat somebody a certain way, of course they're going to support them, because that is what teachers do. That's where their heart is.
So can you put a number on, can you quantify, do we have a teacher shortage? How many is it? And how much was a result of the vaccine issue?
We did not have a teacher shortage. In fact, we are a little bit overstaffed, which is something that we've been talking about in terms of a concern. And 2 years down the line, we are probably looking to see if there's enough retirements to make that overstaff come to a smaller amount of people. We had to staff more than we needed, especially when we had the small groups of students, when we had the small cohorts and things like that, and we haven't let go of people since then. We've used them in other areas. We've used a lot of people when we had the large number of absenteeism in January towards middle of February, where a lot of our staff was sick with Omicron and had to take 10 days off to quarantine and heal. And so we even had district staff, teachers on special assignment and others, cover classrooms for some of those places where we couldn't get enough substitute teachers. We increased the pay of substitute teachers too, to make sure that we had enough people on hand. And I think through that effort, we were able to cover almost all classrooms.
So as you look ahead to academic year 22-23, you're comfortable that we do not have a shortage, that we do have enough teachers?
We do not have a shortage, and we're staffing class sizes lower than the contract language that we have with the teachers union is. With that said, we are concerned that we won't be able to do that the following year.
Why is that?
Because at that point, we've run out of the extra federal funds that we were using to use towards this effort of keeping lower class sizes. That money's run out, and we go back to our typical budget. So we won't be able to do that as much in terms of keeping that amount of staffing going.
All right, let me ask you about that budget issue, because that was another thing that was raised. There was some suggestion that you're, I think, dipping into reserves, using the extra money and reserves. Can you give us your take on that?
Yeah, so last year we also settled salary agreements with both CSEA and SBTA. We gave employees an 8% raise over the next 3 years. 3.5 first year, 2.5 the next year, and 2 the third year. And that money, when we made that decision, we knew we were going to dip slightly into our reserve. But we thought that that was something we wanted to do for our employees. We want to make sure we value them. And then we also looked at our health plan and how much we contribute towards employee health plans. And we did invest a little more in the differences. We have several health plans for our employees. So we did increase some of our investments towards employee health plans. So some of that money also leads to some of this dip into the reserves.
Now, do we have a budget deficit?
We do not have a budget deficit. In fact, I think we were somewhere in the low 30s this year, high 20s next year.
In terms of reserve?
Yeah.
And that's millions, not dollars.
Millions.
Okay.
Yes, we
All
have
right.
millions in the reserves. I do want to say, Jerry, that Santa Barbara Unified, compared to other school districts, because we are a basic aid district, there is a different way to think about the funding compared to LCFF districts, which means that we get funding from the state that is covered by the property taxes of our city. However, we are still held to the same state and federal compliance legal things that we need to do. For example, children who are emergent multilingual learners who are a protected class of students, or special education, which has been underfunded for many, many years, yet has all these federal mandates. I think being a basic aid district, we also have a policy that says we have to have 10% above the required 3% by the state in terms of reserves. So we actually have a goal to always be at 13% reserve, not 3%. Many districts go down as far as 3%. Of course, it's not our goal to get down to 3%, but we are well above that.
Yeah, okay. But just quickly, so I'm clear, but from a cost benefit perspective, it's still better for us to be basic aid than what used to be called ADA. I don't know what it's called now.
It's called LCFF, which is the local control funding formula. It is still better to be basic aid. It basically signals that within our own community, we can afford to provide a quality public education for our kids. There's only about 15% of school districts in the state of California that are in the same situation. We have dipped back into LCFF, and there are times when
It's gone back and forth, hasn't it?
It has gone back and forth depending on the children that we serve and the kind of property taxes that we get. I have been told that we may dip back again. We are close to that, so we're always sort of walking that very fine line. But we try to be very diligent about how we're spending money. The other thing I inherited is just a system that needs a lot of controls and accountability for how we spend our money. And I think that, that's another criticism I've heard, that it takes a long time to get things approved. I inherited a system that didn't do that kind of tracking, even just job transactions. When you have an employee that comes in, having an employee tracking of who's getting hired, how are they getting paid, from what funding. And so we've had a lot of work that we've had to do internally between HR and fiscal, payroll, to really keep track of employee transactions. There's a lot of transactions that happen in schools where maybe a principal decides to promote somebody to another job. So we've been putting some controls in place. One of the biggest fears when you take on a job like this is that you're going to make a mistake when it comes to school safety and budgets. And so that's something that I did inherit some cleaning up to do, and that's what we've been doing.
All right. So that was another thing that we heard, it takes so long to get anything approved. But if I hear what you're saying, you're putting in place new processes to ensure that there's more oversight and accountability on spending.
There was a couple of instances where I found contracts that were approved, but we weren't necessarily tracking the achieved. If you give somebody a contract to do something, you want to make sure that you're checking the progress, you have an evaluation, somebody's monitoring that. And so, those are things that we are really working hard to do. I know that we had a food services issue before I arrived in terms of employee. That goes back to that keeping up with your, how many employees do we have?
Right.
I ask a lot of questions, Jerry, and it's probably annoyed a lot of people. I'm constantly asking for, data, right? How many employees do I have in this department? How many employees do I have in that department? What are their hours? How do we track attendance? We have some attendance that's being tracked online. Some of it is still paper pencil, where we have to collect time cards and put them in. So we're looking at systematizing some of this in a way that we can better track all those things. But those things take time, training, and oversight. And those are things that when you're trying to do things like that while dealing with a pandemic and getting pulled many ways, it does take a toll on a lot of people.
Do you think you're a micromanager?
I have had to be what I call a details person, which is not necessarily my way of always working. And I think that part of that is that I've come into a school system that is very different from the one I come from, and having to learn the processes, completely different student information system, completely different fiscal system, completely different ways of approving curriculum and things like that. So I think, I do ask a lot of questions because I want to understand. And I think that some people may perceive that as being a micromanager.
Okay, fair enough. On a somewhat more substantively, another thing that emerged from this perception was teachers are really struggling, it sounds like, with behavior issues, with student behavior issues. Can you just address that a little bit? I know the New York Times had this piece the other day about not only is there academic learning loss, but there is emotional and behavioral learning loss from the pandemic situation. Is that what's going on, or is it just a change in the way kids are?
Well, I think there's many factors. Both are true. I think that I was just, like I said, I was just here at La Colina this morning, and I see the excitement. I see the different ways that our middle schoolers behave. We did institute a new response to behavior that was kicked off last summer, which I think made people feel like, oh, you're no longer really, doubling down on kids' behavior. And so we've sort of been walking this fine line of trying to be very compassionate and understanding of what children have been through with the pandemic and the loss of social, emotional, relational skills that they need. And at the same time, trying to institute a new response to behavior that takes us away from immediate suspensions, immediate expulsions, and really tries to deal with the whole child and understanding what led to this behavior in the first place. And I think that there is a combination of many factors happening, including, some people need more help with the way that some children come across to them. And I think we could have probably hired more staff in some schools to help with safety. I know that I made some decisions mid-year to hire more campus safety assistants in some places that we hadn't budgeted for because we underestimated that support needed.
Yeah, of course, we've all been, focused on this horrible school shooting situation in Texas. And of course, there have been several since. Say a word, if you would, about our district-wide safety plans for schools for situations like that. I know, there was this push to remove the SROs, and is that the right thing to be doing now? And kind of where are we on all that?
So the SRO at San Marcos did not get approved for San Marcos. And the charge from the board was to reimagine campus safety. Sorry, I'm answering the last part of your question. I know you had a
That's
different
okay.
question at
That's
the
okay.
beginning. And where we're at right now is I've been in negotiations with City of Goleta and the Sheriff's Department on revisioning our model of what an SRO is. We know that the SRO Dos Pueblos is funded by City of Goleta, so I've been talking to them and the sheriffs. The three of us have been working on a memorandum of understanding for a three-way partnership to create a community-based model. We've surveyed our students and been talking to them about how can we cover not just Dos Pueblos, but also Goleta Valley Junior High School, because those are both schools that are in the city of Goleta. We are this close to finishing that, and we've gone back and forth. You know, what does it look like? We are not taking on the role of the sheriff's department, but we're also looking at when do principals call law enforcement and for what reasons? And that's part of this change in response to behavior and the way that we're doing discipline differently. I had a meeting with, God, her name is escaping me right now, the lady that's in charge of the probation department. And she's also making changes with how we take kids into probation and looking at a more holistic way of dealing with students and with young people. So there's this new way of thinking about doing that. However, at the end of the day, Jerry, if a child breaks the law, they're going to have consequences. That is for sure. If the child breaks school rules, they need to have consequences, and we need to work with families and students. We cannot tolerate certain behaviors.
Well, we had this senior prank
That's right.
at Santa Barbara High. That wasn't much of a prank. It was just seemed like vandalism.
That's right.
So, okay. All right.
You have to have a balance of respect for teachers. I really believe highly in respecting teachers. Teachers make mistakes because they're humans, but at the end of the day, I feel that that is such an important position, and I hope that everybody, parents and everyone else understands that. To me, that's one of the highest values is how do we teach children the respect that they need to have for the adults in schools who are there to protect them and to keep them safe.
You know, and I hate to keep going back to this, but I mean, I think, the school shooting thing is just, it's on everybody's mind. Is there, do we have a school by school plan for that?
Yes. Every school works, we have safety administrators at every school who write safety plans. They're due every year. We do drills. And, Jerry, I never
It's sad.
I never thought I would see the day where we would have to train children on what to do if there's an active shooter. And every time I think of, my boys are now 23 and 24, but I have nieces and nephews and others that are young. And I think of, Rosie and Isabella, my two great nieces that are in like second and fourth grade, and thinking about how they would have to go to active shooter training where we teach kids how to hide, how to stay quiet, how to move away from doors and windows. But it even goes as far as saying how to fight back. It's unconscionable to me that a school is not a sacred place in our communities. I just cannot get my head around that. And I think it's wrong. And then we think about, I know I've heard from parents, emails, put an SRO in every school. Well, we know that there were SROs in schools when these shootings have happened, not just in the last one we saw in Texas, but in others. It's all of us together working as a community to take care of our children and to look for signs and to understand and to think about how do we keep each other safe. But it's unconscionable to me. That just, when I came to this country when I was 12 years old, we used to do nuclear war drills.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I remember
To do
that.
in case of a nuclear war. The nuclear war drill seems so much further than a boy down the street or a girl or a woman or a man who can take an AR-15 and decide to come shoot us in schools.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, those nuclear, put your hands on your head and your head between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye, I think was that one. That's what we always said. All right, what about learning loss though, academically? Do you have enough data at this point to quantify that? Are there measurables about it? How are you addressing it?
We have seen it in at all levels. I don't have quantifiable data to give to you. We will have some more reading results and math results in the coming weeks as people have finished doing that. I will say though, Jerry, that we have a lot of things we need to fix when it comes to adopting new curriculum. In elementary, for example, we have not adopted a reading program for over 10 years. That's something also I inherited, and that's something that I have put together an early literacy task force. We've been talking about, what have we been doing? We've been doing the Lucy Calkins Balanced Literacy Program. We have the Open Core program. We have all sorts of programs across our elementary schools, and that way we are not unified. And one of the things we did mid-year is started to really purchase new programs, Haggerty and others that are the phonics, phonemic awareness, beginning early reader programs that we are instituting. We've trained teachers in elementary to start doing that work. We will continue to do that work. For summer school, we purchased another program called 95% Group that's also looking at phonics and phonemic awareness. And as a former first grade teacher, I cannot think of anything more important that we can be doing. I also, as a bilingual teacher, understand that if you're teaching phonemic awareness and phonics to kids who don't yet speak the language, you have to be very mindful and thoughtful about the letter sounds and the meaning of the words, because at the end of the day, teaching reading is about making meaning of the words and having high levels of comprehension of text. With the 95% Group, what I've asked my team that's working on EML issues is to take something as simple as the letter sound cards and say, the letter J is got the picture of maybe somebody jogging, but maybe or Jerry. But we don't have the name Jerry in Spanish, but if we had a picture of juice and jugo, then it's the same letter, the different sounds because it's a different language, but you can make meaning of the picture, which helps you make sense of the letter that you put together to make words. So we're looking at things like that. We will definitely be looking to adopt a new program next year. However, we're mindful that the state is not going to come up with a new framework till 2027. So we're in this pivotal moment where we have to ask ourselves, do we begin to adopt, or do we begin to train teachers on how to teach reading to all levels of kids with dyslexia, kids who are emergent multilinguals, kids who are special ed, kids who are gifted? How do we help teachers understand what that takes?
Yeah, and it's got to happen in grades 1 to 3. I mean, it's so important there.
Actually, TK to 3, Jerry.
TK, yeah. So were you surprised when Lucy Calkins came out and said, "Oh, never mind, we got to add more phonics to this"?
Well, I'm not a Lucy Calkins follower. I'm a follower of. I used to teach for the UCLA California Reading and Literature Project many, many years ago when I used to be young and smarter. And when I taught, I did an institute for teachers in the summers on how to teach reading to English learners. And when I did that, I always had a combination of both. It's both the love of reading, the making sense of words, because there are some natural readers that happen in schools, and also the word by word teaching to read students. So a teacher in TK to 2nd grade really has a major lift that combines all of those things together.
Okay. All right. There's been, a lot of discussion, debate, controversy going on now about the I don't know, universal access, is that what we're calling it, or leveling up or something? Can you just kind of briefly break that down and explain where we are on that?
So again, this is another one of these areas of the school system that I needed to understand better when it came to how we enroll children for the junior high school and then up to high school. And I learned that we basically went from a system where we decided based on test scores how we place children in honors or college prep to a system where it's just you choose, kind of like you choose your own adventure. Do you want to be in honors or college prep? In junior high school, it's slightly different than high school, but what staff have informed me about when it came to that is that we started to see a very clear division of ethnicities around who goes into honors and college prep, and teachers themselves started to really realize this is not really working. We need to have all sorts of kids in our classrooms. And I've had to go and meet with some of the teachers myself to understand what they were thinking about doing, how were we helping to prepare them to meet the different levels of learning that we have, and what they needed to be able to make this successful. So as I learned more, as I got deep into talking with the principals, with Ms. Carey, with Ms. Quijano, our teacher on special assignment, and the teachers, I started to really look at this through the lens of the lift that it was going to take. And I realized that unless we had some external partnership with someone that was kind of helping us think outside of our own selves, we weren't going to be successful. I know that parents feel that by mixing children, the high achievers or the honors students will get less. And I've been assured by teachers that that will not happen. And I have to trust the teachers when they tell me that. But beyond that, I've also worked with principals to say, how will you know when you walk into a classroom whether or not this differentiation is happening, so that you can give feedback to your teachers if you don't see it or if you do see it? And then we landed on this calendar for the year of common assessments and common rubrics, which rubrics are basically the way we grade, an essay. And so teachers made agreements for next year. We already created a calendar. When will the children be assessed? How will we come together to score and make sure that what I think is a 4, which is the highest level you can get, is the same as Jerry's number 4, if you're my co-teacher, for example? Or do you think it's a 3 and I think it's a 2? And that kind of calibration between teachers will be happening next year as well, so that we can really truly have a school system that has a really clear expectation so that parents know what their children will get.
So you mentioned the concern by some parents if the honor students are going to get less attention or less instruction than they had previously. And then the flip side of that is I guess the college prep, some of the college preps who are struggling, how are they going to get kind of extra help that they need?
Right. So we talked about what are some investments you're setting aside for tutoring, peer mentoring, after school if needed. I know that we have AVID programs in our schools that we want to lean into in terms of study skills and other kinds of supports that students get. And so those are all the conversations we have been having since January. February, January is when we started this conversation. And so we as a system made investments last year in something called multi-tiered system of support work, where we have an external consultant that's been working with us on how we take a whole system approach to making these decisions and ensuring we don't have too many. So I've taken their framework to help us design something that looks at what are the administrative leadership's, actions. How do we look at an educational framework together? How do we engage our family and community? And I'm going to be the first one and the last one probably to admit we did not do a good job of engaging families and community when it came to this project. And that was why we did the webinar, and that was the first of many.
That was this week, the webinar.
On Tuesday, and that's the first of many ways that we need to make sure that we do a better job of engaging families, all families. And then looking at our policies, like I was saying, when I got here, there aren't any written policies that I can find that say to counselors, here's how you place kids or things like that. And those are things that we look to put in place for next year, so that if people change, we have written procedures in place. When it comes to students in college prep and students with special needs, we have, let me go to special education. We have co-teaching models where we know that teachers will work together. I was in a co-teaching model as a teacher where I planned alongside a special ed teacher, and we mixed our children together so that different levels of kids could get different levels of supports.
So you're going ahead with this. I mean, this is gonna happen, come the fall.
We're taking it to we're taking the action plans to the board next, Tuesday, not next Tuesday, June 14th.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. Uh, just a couple minutes left, but this horrible incident that happened at one of the schools about kids reenacting the George Floyd killing, and it's led to a whole new initiative about anti-blackness in the school. Say a word about that, if you would.
I have a lot to say about that, not just one word, Jerry. It's work that we have not shied away from because we know that it's so important for every single student and staff member in our school district to take to heart what it means to dehumanize a person. And we will not tolerate that for any reason. And it's something that we will be working on. All of these points that you're bringing up, by the way, Jerry, are connected to each other. It's not something that we are going to treat as separate, but really combating anti-blackness, discipline issues, what we do with our curriculum, how we take care of the whole child. Those are all things that are connected that we plan to take on. I'm working still to try to get a couple of bids for a company to come and do a racial climate assessment. And part of that racial climate assessment will include looking at our curriculum and some of the things that we have in place so that no one ever feels disrespected or dehumanized.
All right. And then this whole issue about the iPads, where younger kids, everybody had to be online, had to have a screen. Now we're back in person. We're gonna the first and second grade are not going to have screens, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we started collecting the May 23rd, the TK to third grade iPads, and we're going to do a reset to look at what is our instructional technology program. We gave those iPads out. We were never a TK to 3 device school district. I believe we were 4 through 12. And so we are going to look at that space and work with anybody that's interested in coming to work with us in that area. We know that in fact, again, connecting all the dots, some of the issues that we have had that are race related have to do with social media apps that kids have used to bully each other in cyberspace. And we want to make sure that we have responsible use of technology, that we help parents understand what digital citizenship is about, and that we do a better job of, again, engaging with our community and our families so that we all can be responsible for what we do for kids and with kids.
Yeah, a couple of the teacher comments said, a lot of the behavioral issues relate to phones, kids bringing their
Yes.
phones to school and using them. Are you considering having a ban on phones in school?
That is the conversation that I intend to have in a couple of weeks with Joyce. She and I are getting together with our new assistant, Sue Kenya Edison, some of my staff in that department, Jennifer Belacius, Laura, others in that space, a couple of principals, and she'll be bringing also some teachers to talk about, so far I've heard 3 things: the cell phone use, tardiness, and dress codes have been some of the main issues that have come up. But again, connecting the dots, cell phone use could be related to bullying and use of social media apps that just take us all away. Jerry, I have to tell you, I have to get off of this thing myself. I mean, my husband has to remind me, and I told him, honey, when you see me, take the phone from me unless it's unless it's an issue at a school or some urgent thing, because we did become tethered to technology and we need to stop.
Yeah. I was also struck by this comment by one of the teachers. I am not a counselor, doctor, cop, mental health therapist, custodian, grant writer, nurse, parent, babysitter to my students. Are there mental health resources for the teachers who have gone through this pandemic, who are really struggling with burnout and other things available?
Yes, through our health insurance program, we have a program called SAVE that teachers can access. It's part of their healthcare program package. If they are feeling that way, we highly encourage them to get some help. And you know, we did, going back to San Marcos, instead of having an SRO, we invested in a licensed clinical social worker so that they could start to deal with some of the behaviors that kids are having in a different way, a different approach, where it's not so much like you're misbehaving, you're gone, but more like, hey, you're misbehaving. What's going on? Let's come over here. Let's talk about it. Have you had something to eat yet? Did you have a bad morning? You know, we all express ourselves so differently. I know that, you know, when I'm upset, if I have a bad day at work, I have to remind myself, and I'm not always good about this, to not take it out on my husband or my kids. I sometimes just will come home and say, let me just decompress. I don't always do it. And I think we need to remind people that behaviors are a window to what is happening internally for many of us. But I can understand too. I was a teacher in my first year teaching in a public housing community where I had kids coming with issues of domestic violence, drug addiction, gangs, and I didn't always know how to deal with them because I wasn't trained as a teacher on these social emotional issues. I was lucky to work in a school that had a whole group of people that did that work for us, and I would refer kids to a counselor to take care of those things. And I think we have been doing that a lot more and more as well, but certainly not enough to meet the need.
All right. You've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I just want to go back to close the circle where we started this breakdown in communication. Do you feel confident that there is now a strategy in place to address that issue? To and you know acknowledge, gee, we didn't really have a reset after we were coming out of pandemic learning. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been hearing lots of graduation speeches. We have fallen down and we get up and we keep going and we encourage each other. And there is going to be hiccups, but we are going to listen and learn and get other people's perspectives about what it looks like from the side. And we're going to do better when we know better. And I'm looking forward to just continuing to build relationships in my new community so that I can speak the Santa Barbara language and the Santa Barbara way of doing things that I'm continuing to learn.
All right. Dr. Hilda Maldonado, thank you so much for taking the time and talking about all of these issues with us. Congratulations on making it through the year
Thank
and
you.
keeping the schools open, which you said, let's not forget. All right. Thanks. Thanks
Thank you
very
so
much.
much, Jerry.